Welcome, everyone. We will begin the webinar on struggling with a shrinking bottom line. Here is why and how to easily fix it. I'm Melissa Joles with RDA Impact. Mark Olson, CEO of Vehicle Collision Experts, is your presenter today. The presentation will take approximately 40 minutes. We are recording it and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. If you have questions, you can do two things. You can raise your hand in the control bar and I can unmute you, or you can type your question in the chat box at the bottom right of the screen and Mark will answer them during the presentation. Now I'll turn it over to Mark.
Okay, well, thank you, Melissa. And I really appreciate the opportunity to present to your group today. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Olson, as Melissa said. I am the CEO of Vehicle Collision Experts, or you might know the company as VECO Experts. And my background is I started out washing cars in a body shop, worked my way from there into painting some cars and fixing small dents, and became a journey level collision repair technician and refinish technician. I'm a former shop owner and former adjuster and former ICAR instructor, so former a lot of things. I am also one of the original founders of Verifax Automotive, which I owned until 2016, and then I started VECO Experts. I also own another company called Future Forensics, in which we do automotive damage forensic investigations. So today's presentation is all about you and all about you making money. So I'm just going to real quickly, okay, let's see if this is going to go. There we go. So I'm just going to kind of run through just kind of the state of the industry and just some things to think about. And so I don't know everybody, you know, I love Zoom calls, etc. So you can see all the faces and, you know, the names and all that, but I don't have that opportunity here today to see who's on the call. So I'm going to be really speaking to collision repair facilities, although if you are in support of a collision repair facility, you know, maybe you're a jobber or a consultant or that kind of thing, I invite you to share this with them. This will make a difference in their business. So here's just a couple things in the state of the industry and some things to think about. So the average severity, depending on your market, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3,200 to $3,500 in the collision repair industry. So it's about $3,400 kind of average, depending on who you talk to. And then parts percentage of repair is now about 40 to 45% of the total gross ticket now. 20 years ago, it was about 35%. So if you have $3,400 worth of parts or $3,400 in the total repair, about 40 to 45% of that is going to be allocated towards the parts column, whereas about 35% 20 years ago. Labor is less than half of the repair. And 20 years ago, it was about 60%. Now this depends on the market, but what I really want you to understand in this whole thing is that in the overall amount of sales, the percentage of parts versus labor has shifted. And it's been on a pretty steady parts going up, labor going down for quite a while. And then sublet has gone up. So the amount of sublet that goes on in a repair nowadays has gone up. In the old days, it was maybe sublet was for an alignment or something like that. But nowadays, sublet is your glass, it's your alignments, it's your ADAS resets. There's a lot more sublet going on. And shops normally mark those up 20 to 25%. And that depends on if you're a DRP or you're not a DRP and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to kind of break down some numbers for you real quick. Let's do just really simple math. Now, this is not a lesson in how to read a financial statement, but I just want you to see something. So how you want to run if you're running a decent facility, and you can take this and compare this against your statement and see how you're running. So first of all, if you're labor, you want to run it at 60% gross profit, which means that every $100 every $100 that you bring in labor, you get to keep 60% of that, and you get to pay out 40% of that. There's a big scenario. That number can change a little bit based on whether you load it or unload it. And what I mean by that is that sometimes people will include, like when you you pay somebody, you got to pay half of their FICA, which is, basically 7.5% roughly. And so, so those numbers can change, but as long as you're comparing apples to apples, if you compared your statement 5 years ago to where it is today, what you've probably seen is your, if you're looking at your labor gross profit, you want it to run about 60%. Parts, 25%, material, 20%, sublet, 20%, and other stuff. What I mean by other is, and that's a new column that most people haven't seen, but I think it's worthy of noting. Let's just say that you have like storage, where 10 days of storage and all that. Doesn't really cost you anything, maybe some admin, that kind of stuff. So that's got a high gross profit, but not a big number in your overall sales, unless that's your business model. So all that aside, you want to run a gross profit minimum of 40%. If you drop below 40%, you're going to have a hard time making money. Now you want to be higher than that, but that's kind of your bottom floor. And then your expenses maximum, you want to be at 30%. So at the end of the day, your net goal is to make 10%. So as you can imagine, if your gross profit goes down, let's say you're at 39, and let's say that your expenses are at 32, your net is going to go down to 8%. So if we just kind of keep that standard 10% net, a shop with $2 million in sales would have a net of $200,000 in that scenario. Now, I will tell you, if we look across at our friends to the, or up to our friends to the north, Canada, or we look across the pond to our friends in Europe, namely UK, what you'll see is that their nets are about 1 to 2%. Now, what does that mean? That means that either their gross profit is down or their expenses are up. Now, in Europe, many of the shops, they offer a free rental car with every repair, and that's how they advertise it. So they just have a fleet of 100 rental cars or however many rental cars, and customer drops off, they give them a rental car, and away they go. Well, that comes off in expenses. So just doing some real simple math, if you want to look at what your net is, now if your net is 20%, you're doing good. If your net's 2%, you could use some improvement. If you're running at 10%, you're doing okay. You're not doing great, but you're not doing not doing terrible either. You can survive on 10%. As soon as you start lowering down, many shops across the country that we work with are running at 3, 4, and 5%. It is really difficult to grow, and it's really difficult to get to another level, to buy more equipment and those kinds of things, if you're running, in those lower numbers. And I get it. There's a lot of people that are. Now, there are some shops, just so you know, across the pond in the UK that are running a negative net. So they're basically just churning dollars and not making money. You can't do that very long because you can't make up for it in volume. Okay, so what does it mean? If labor dollars to repair dollars are shrinking on the percentage of the repair, getting a minimum of 40% gross profit becomes more difficult. Because how do you sell all kinds of stuff at 25% gross profit and get to 40? It's mathematically impossible. The other thing that you got to look at is if you have an out of balance staff, like your front office to technicians. So that means how many people you have in the front versus how many people you got in the back. So if it's out of balance, your expenses are going to be high. So if you have one office person to 2 techs, that's doing really well. Now, if you're running 1-to-1, it's tough. So if you have 5 people in the back, actually with hands-on cars making money, and you have 5 people up front that are answering the phones and writing estimates, it's going to get real tough because that money is going to come out of your expenses. And it makes it really difficult to maintain a minimum of 10% net. Now, today's class is not how to read a financial statement. Today is just have you just kind of think about some things, okay? So now what about if you give discounts? Say that you're a DRP. Labor discounts are not the issue. I'm going to say it again. Labor discounts are not the issue. So think about it. Let's say that you just easy math, not saying this is what it is, but let's say that your labor rates, your labor rate is $50 an hour and somebody wants you to do it at 48. and then there's 10 hours on the job, basically you gave them a $20 discount. Okay, so that's not the big issue. The big issue is parts and sublet margins. So let me show you that. If you look at your net, just go back to your statements year over year and look at the amount of gross profit in parts. So I'm just going to kind of jump back here to this one here. Your gross profit in parts of 25%. Okay. If you look at your gross profit in parts, whatever that number is, so you sold, $500,000 in parts, and you wound up with $125,000 in because you're 25% gross profit, $125,000. I can tell you that you're probably a $1.2 million shop if you're running at 10%, or you're a $2.4 million shop if you're running at 5%. But you're going to see a definite correlation between your parts, how much you make in parts and gross profit, and your bottom line net if you have other things in line. So here's the problem. If you have a DRP and you give a 10% discount on parts, you're actually, in reality, giving away about 35% of your net. I'm going to say that again. If you give a 10% discount on parts, you're giving away about 35% of your net. Just let that sink in for a minute. Okay. And then what about markup on sublet? Hey, you take it to the alignment shop, you get an alignment, and you mark it up. Many insurance companies are going to say, hey, we'll give you a 20% markup, and you think that's generous, or you're striving for a better markup than 25% or 30, or whatever you're marking things up. If you mark something up by 20%, you're actually only getting a 17% margin. So let me give you the example of that. You buy the part for 100 and you mark it up for 20%, which now gives you $120. Your gross profit is $20. Now, since you sold it for 120 and you bought it for 100, your actual margin is 16.67, or about 17%. So now, if we go back again to here, remember we want to hit a minimum of 20% on sublet. Minimum, and you should be higher, but minimum. So you can never get to 20% on sublet if you're marking things up 20%. It's the difference between markup and margin. Now, again, today's not a math class. Just want you to understand there are some things that are going on where, if the insurance companies say, give me a 5% discount on parts or a 10% discount on parts, you are giving your net away. Your rent didn't change, your light bill didn't change, and all that money's coming directly out of your net. And it doesn't sound like much, it's only 10%, right? It actually makes a big difference in your bottom line net of your shop. Okay. So here's just normal parts buying. So now if you're going to buy a part from the dealer, the list price on the part is 120. Let's just say, make that up. And the vendor gives you a 20% discount. And I know a lot of you guys get a lot more than that, but a 20% discount. So 120 minus 20% is $24, which is 96. That's a true 20% margin. So when you're taking a list price and giving a discount, it's far different than taking what you paid for it and doing a markup. So the simple math, if you understand it, many discount structures are much better than that. Okay, so here's just a quick markup guide. If you do a 20% markup, your margin is 16.67. If you mark it up 25%, you're going to get 20. So if we're going to shoot for 20% in a gross profit level, we're going to shoot for a 20% gross profit on sublet or markup. You're going to have to be marking everything up an average of 25% to hit 20. Okay, a 30% markup is 23, 35% markup is 26, and if you mark it up 40%, it's 29.42. And margin is gross profit. And the whole name of the game, bottom line, is what? Why are you in business? You're in business to make money. So understanding how the numbers work make a big deal. Okay, now this is where it's going to get interactive for you. And I really invite you to do this. And if you don't do it, what's going to wind up happening is you're going to come back and rewatch this, and you'll wind up rewatching it because you're going to want to do this exercise. And I also invite you to actually ask your staff to do this as well separately from you. Okay, so the canary in the coal mine, very simple. The canary in the coal mine is just an early indicator. For those of you in like Pennsylvania, you know exactly what I'm saying. For those of you in Seattle, probably don't know exactly what canary in the coal mine is potentially. But basically, a canary in the coal mine is, back in the old days, the miners would, the coal miners would take a canary down in the coal mine. And as long as the canary is sitting on their perch, singing away, life's good, then everything's good. But as soon as the canary fell off its perch and died, that was an early indicator of some bad gases and stuff that could kill people in the mine, and it was time to get out. Now, they don't do that anymore. They got electronic things on that they can bring down there that'll sense these things, but they used to use that as the early indicator. So we call it the canary in the coal mine because these are early indicators of where profit is running away from you, aside from the problem with I can make this work. So aside from just knowing your numbers and stuff. So we do a quick interview, and I'm going to do this interview with everybody here, and I invite you to participate. This will make a difference, and I don't care what side of the business you're in, this will apply to you. So I'm going to run through these 10 different questions here. And so one of them is the comeback rate. One of that's the internal comeback rate, which I'll explain that to you. Stop and start, a supplement number record, SOPs, are they used? SOPs, do they work? Gross profit, net expense percentage, days to repair, keys to keys, and cycle time or touch time and safety. So, and after this presentation, I'm going to be emailing this as well as my presentation if Melissa wants it, for anybody to be able to get this, or if you want, you can send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's just a really simple survey. So everybody grab a piece of paper, a napkin or something, and I'm going to walk through this interview, and it's going to be very enlightening for you how your business is running. Okay, so just get a piece of paper, a pen. I can't see you. You're not going to turn it in. This is strictly for you, but this will help you. Okay. So in the canary in the coal mine. So number one, just put comeback on a piece of paper. What do you think your comeback rate is? And when I say that, I mean come back for anything. So I'll give you a second on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is we got this thing dialed, no problem, nothing ever comes back, or 1, oh my God, everything comes back. For one reason or another, we don't know why, but everything comes back. Just put that down, a scale of 1 to 10, whatever the number is, just don't worry about it, just put the number down. Okay, now let me talk about the comeback rate. The average comeback rate, when we have done this, when I say comeback, I mean comeback for anything. They come back for a back-ordered emblem. They come back because they forgot their garage door opener. They come back because you forgot to put the floor mats back in. They come back because there's a run in the paint and you have to repaint the side. The average, if you really track it, it is between 20 and 25%. Now let's do some quick math. Let's say that, I'm going to use easy numbers for me because I'm not a math major. Let's say you do 100 cars. Now, if you do 25 cars, then just take 25% of what I'm saying. If you do 100 cars and 20 of them come back for some reason, that's 20% comeback. The average comeback is between $500 and $600. Let's just say it's $500. Now, when I say it's $500, you go, wait a minute. How can an emblem that gets left off the car or it's on back order cost me $500? Well, we have to figure everything into it. So what I mean by that is, so the customer comes back and, first of all, you have to call them and tell them that it's in, and then they come back. And then they say, oh, okay, we'll put the emblem on. So what you do now is you grab, somebody pulls it into the shop, and there's Fred, and you want Fred to put the emblem on, but meanwhile, Fred's putting a quarter panel on a car. So you stop Fred from what he was doing and ask Fred to come over and put the emblem on. So Fred, dusts everything off and then comes over and puts it on. Might take Fred maybe, just a few minutes to do it. And then Fred goes back to work. But if you look at number 3, start stop average, when we get there, you actually just stopped Fred from working and he has to start back up. He's going to lose more than in mental time on that. And then on top of that, you may wash the car or something like that. That's a simple comeback. What about if we got to repaint the entire car? And now we got to, or not the entire car, but like say we got to repaint a fender, or we got to put on pinstripes, or we got to adjust the door. All those things start to add up. Average is going to be about 500. Very simple numbers. If in fact you do 100 cars a month and you have a comeback rate of 20%, you just lost $10,000 in net. Very, very simple. So what you want to do is look at, how do you stop the comeback? Well, the only way to stop the comeback, if you don't measure it, you can't find it. So real simple, put a tracker on your front desk, and whoever is there, you say, I want you to write down anytime a customer comes back, just write down what it was, who it was, what it was, and why. And you might just start to see a pattern after 30 days. I promise you, we've done this with hundreds of shops, and all of a sudden they're like, oh geez, every time, Fred the estimator gets involved, we don't have emblems on time. Or, every time, Joe paints a car, it's a comeback. Or every time, we don't properly deliver the car back to the customer, it becomes a comeback. All of that stuff starts to add up very, very quickly. Not to mention, all the problems with your CSI scores and all that. We're not talking KPIs here. We're talking money in your back pocket. So if you were to take, and reduce your comebacks from 20% to 10%, which, that's a real number, just walk up to your front desk and ask whoever's answering the phone, how many cars do you think come back? And then track it. You'll see that you may not be adjusted into reality. So then all of a sudden you start to pay attention, and what you pay attention to starts to improve. Okay, that's the external comeback rate. Now you may want to change your number, the number you just put down, whether it was, it was 10, it was great, and you're like, yeah, we're not that great. Okay, how about a 7 or a 6 or whatever? Just put it on the paper. Okay, next one's called the internal comeback. This is the one that kills you. And it's kind of like, and we call it, you got your own internal factory where you're actually running 2 shops in one because of the internal comeback. So I'm just going to show you a quick example of this. Internal comeback. So there's 3 levels of an internal comeback. And there's also 9 different places in your shop that it can come back. And what I mean by that is that you pass it from one department to the other and it wasn't ready to be there yet. So you might pull a car into a body tech and all the parts are wrong. So you pull the car back out. That's an internal comeback. It's coming back to not being worked on. Okay. Let's just use paint, for example. So a soft comeback. Let's say that a car goes from body to paint and there's some pinholes. And the painter's like, you know what? I'll just fix that myself. Or, there's some scratches. I'll just sand them out. I'll just fix it. It takes the average painter 10 to 15 minutes in productivity time to fix something that is a soft comeback. Now, the painters that I've interviewed, and you may interview your painters as well, or just watch it, or you could have them track it. Just say every time a car comes in and it's not ready to paint, so you may have something in your shop that says we want everything in 180, or we want everything in 220 or 320, or whatever your rule is. Ask them to write down anything that doesn't come in at that level that they got to fix. You're going to find that 60 to 70% of the time, your painters are spending an extra little bit to fix something that should have been fixed in body. Okay, that's the soft comeback. The medium comeback, that's when the painter says, you know what, this is not right, I can't paint it. I got to go back and get the technician. So now the painter stops what they're doing, and then they go back to the body technician and say, hey, Joe, guess what? I need to come over and look at something. So now they stop what they're doing and they go over to paint, and then they have to fix whatever it is, and then they go back. Both technicians are going to lose about 20 minutes. plus materials. And then the hard comeback is the vehicle sent back to the body department. So now we're going to actually take it out of the paint department, back to the body department. The time loss is at least a half an hour and a half a day of cycle time plus materials. So if you start watching that, you got your own internal factory in the back. If 60 to 70% of the time, per our research, shows that that's what's happening, can you imagine the amount of money you're losing? So let's just look at this from a whole nother level. A 200% efficient technician with a soft comeback will cost the shop, let's just say it's a $50 an hour labor rate, okay? 200% technician with a soft comeback will cost the shop $25 per car in labor and $10 in material, and the technician's going to lose a half an hour off their paycheck if they're a 200% efficient technician. And our research shows, and this is over hundreds of shops all over the country, that 60 to 70% of vehicles have at least a soft comeback. So if you worked on just that and only that, body to paint, stopping that, what you would see is you would make more money in materials because you wouldn't use as many materials. And oftentimes what you're going to find is it's just one little thing where, and I'm just going to show you an example of just a soft comeback that the way it goes. So now if you look at, this is just 7 wastes, and industry has run forever on what they call the 7 wastes, overproduction, higher inventory, waiting for something, motion, transportation, rework, and processing. The other waste, which is up in the upper right, which industry has not really paid attention to for a long time, is the 8th waste, which is the wasted potential of people. So really want to have you think about that, but you notice by number 6 is the big one I was just talking about. You have to rework it. It's not right the first time, so we got to fix it. Okay. So let me just give you an example. So this Honda Pilot. Actually, you know what? That's not right. It's not even a Pilot. It's a Ridgeline. But I can tell you, I walked by this car. This is a shop in San Diego, and I can tell you by walking by it at 20 feet, this car was a redo or a comeback or something. Okay. And then what I was looking at was I could see the jagged edges around the edges of the primer, and I could see a little bit of fuzz. Upon closer inspection, I could really see it much more closely. And then I looked at this. So let's look at what the failure of this is. So first of all, those are 80 grit scratches, and if you have a SOP in your shop that says that it has to come over in at least 180 or 320. Clearly, they missed this. But what happened is the body tech sanded it with 80 and then kept putting filler over the top of 80 grit scratches. So what that's going to do, that's going to swell, and it's going to it's going to shrink such that eventually that'll be an external comeback if it ever comes back. But if it ever gets in another accident, somebody says, "Hey, who fixed it last time?" Oh, they did. Well, look at how bad they did. That is an absolute comeback. Now, how did this happen? Well, I talked to the guy that did it, and he said, "Yeah, my last shop would never get away with that, but I saw everybody else doing it, so that's what I figured the standard was." So he wasn't told what the standard was, even though the owner of the shop said their standard was 220 to paint. So clearly that didn't happen. So I'm talking to the painter, and I said, "Why did you just primer over the top of it?" He goes, "You know what? It's easier to just not hassle the body guys and take it back to them. It's just easier to primer over the top. So now what are we doing? We're spending more material, more in time, probably an external comeback, and it's all because the SOP that the shop said that they had, nobody really followed." So now, how do you think you're doing on number 2 here on external or internal comebacks? And that's body to paint, paint to body, that kind of thing. If you really break down each one of those, I could spend all day on number 2, just the next hour and a half on number 2, which Melissa said I can't. So that's what we got. Okay, number 3, start stop. I'm going to give you something that you've probably heard before in your shop. It's called "Got a minute?" So you're sitting there writing an estimate. You're sitting there mentally into doing something, and somebody walks up and says, hey, got a minute? Or, hey, can I bother you real quick? Well, guess what? Even if you say no, or you don't got a minute, you actually just stopped what you were doing mentally. Now think about that. You're right in the middle of a big estimate. It's 200 lines. You really got your mind. And says somebody says, hey, line one, and then you take your phone call, and then after you're done with your phone call, now you got to try and mentally get back into what you were doing. This is a killer. Now I can tell you, body techs will tell you that shop owners are probably the biggest culprit or the problem with this, where they're into something and the body or the parts person comes up and says, hey, I need to talk to you about this part real quick. So putting structure into your shop, if you actually were to track every time somebody stops you for any reason, and just start keeping track. You start keeping track of, oh, well, Joe stopped me for a quick question and Fred stopped me for a quick question. What's even worse is the body tech was in the body tech stall, and then they walked into the front office and they stood there and waited till you hung up the phone, and then they said, hey, you got a minute? That is a killer. It is not efficient. So if you fix just that, that would allow people to keep mentally into what they're doing, and they're going to be more productive. I'm telling you, put a tracker on it. Just say every time somebody interrupts you for any reason, just write down who it is and why. You'll start to see the pattern. That's the canary in the coal mine. Okay, next one. And again, write down on how you think you're doing on that in your shop on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being nobody ever interrupts me, and number 1, I get interrupted all the time. And then just figure out how put your number down. Okay, now supplement number record. So I want you to consider that if you write the estimate, and sometimes you write a street estimate, which personally at Vico, we don't recommend you write street estimates. You might take some notes, but you really can't write the real estimate until you bring it in and tear the whole thing down or blueprint it, okay? But if you blueprint the car, you should catch everything. If you do full disassembly and etc., and maybe your supplement might be parts price increases or a sublet bill or something. But if you're looking for a clip on Friday at 2 o'clock, that's a supplement. Even if you don't charge for it, it's something that you missed in the process. So the supplement number record, you should have no more than, after your blueprint, no more than 1 supplement. Now you might say, well, okay, State Farm, we work with them, they tell us our supplement number's 1, but I want you to get that every time a car goes into the paint of the body department and then turns around and the body tech says, hey, got a minute? Another waste of time, like number 3 there, and all of a sudden they say, I need 3 more clips on this. Or you're walking through the shop saying, hey, I need 3 more clips on this, that kind of thing. That's a supplement. If you start really tracking that, and an easy way to do it is every time that you have a piece of paper that says, I need more time, or I need another part, or how many times you actually call and order parts at a dealer or that kind of thing, each one of those you could consider a supplement because it wasn't caught in the beginning. If you start to look and you track that, you will see there's a pattern there. And every time that you do that, that wastes people's time. And remember, back to the beginning, when I said, how is your office running? If you're running 1 person in the office to 1 to 2 techs in back, you're doing pretty darn good. You can make some pretty good money doing that. But if you're running 1 person in the office to 1 person in the back, it's going to be a lot more difficult to make money. So what happens is some of the things I'm talking about here, the start stop, supplement number, that kind of stuff starts to look at your inefficiency such that you have to hire more people. And the bottom line is you just make less money, and we're here to make money. Okay. Number 5, SOPs. You probably got SOPs. Now, we've been in hundreds of shops all over the country, and we say, hey, where's your SOP for this? They're like, oh, well, let me look it up. I can't find it. Well, if you can't find it, you don't got it. And on top of that, If you give me an SOP that you say everybody does in your shop, except if I were to walk around and talk to your techs and say, hey, here's the SOP for this. This is how you guys do it. They go, oh no, we don't really do it that way. Then you don't have an SOP. So an SOP is something that everybody agrees upon and does it the same way every time. Think about McDonald's. Think they have an SOP on how to make a hamburger and how many things to put in a bag. In fact, if you read the bag at McDonald's, I found it interesting. Went to McDonald's one day and they said, oh, this is one hamburger and fries or 3 hamburgers. You can't put any other different combination in that bag. That's what it's designed for. So you might have SOPs. The question is, are they used the way you designed them? And then, so that's one. So how are you doing on that? Scale of 1 to 10. And then the next one is SOP, Standard Operating Procedures. If you don't know what SOP is, Standard Operating Procedure. If they did use them, would they work? Very distinctly different questions there. One of them is many shops have SOPs that they don't use. They don't even know if they work. But a lot of them have SOPs and they're kind of used and they don't work. So are they good SOPs enough to work, or are they just not being used? And the biggest one that you could probably look at today is the quality control form in your shop. I could call you and say, how do you do quality control? Oh, I got this form, or we use checklist and CCC or whatever. Is it used the way it's designed? Again, we've been in hundreds of shops all over the country. We have only been in a couple that actually use the quality control sheet the way it's designed. Now, if you aren't going to use it the way it's designed, then get rid of it, don't have it. What you're teaching your employees is that it's okay to have a way that everybody's supposed to do it and they can ignore that. You're teaching them that it's okay to not follow the company. So either get everybody on board or get rid of it. Better to not have an SOP that's not, better to have an SOP that's, if you don't have it, it's better to have an SOP that is used than get rid of the SOP. Either way, you either use it or get rid of it. Don't go in between at all. Okay, so number 5, do you have SOPs? Are they used? Scale of 1 to 10. And then, and if they're not using them, you might want to get with your employees and ask them why. More, a lot of times they go, oh, well, that's because, we haven't used that for 10 years. We haven't done that way. Another thing you might want to look at is like your check-in sheet. If you have on your check-in sheet blanks, like on your check-in sheet, the VIN number's there, but you never fill in the VIN number, then you're actually not using the form the way you designed it. Easy way to handle that, get rid of the VIN number off it. You got the customer's name and RO number. Why are you putting the VIN on there? Why do you have a spot for it? What you're teaching people is that it's okay to have a form and not fill it out completely. Okay. I talked about the bulletproof file here with RDA here, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. I want to go back and look at that one. I talk about that ad nauseum. Okay. Now, number 6, obviously, do your SOPs work? Scale of 1 to 10. Just put a number down. Okay. Now, number 7. We kind of started this off talking about money. Gross profit, net, and expense percentage. If you were not tracking with me on my first 5 slides of this presentation, you are having trouble with number 7. So you might think you know your numbers, but if you couldn't track the first 5 slides of my presentation, you don't know your numbers. You got to know your gross profit. You got to know your net. You got to know your expense percentages. And there's a whole bunch of other things, the gross profit and parts and labor and all that kind of stuff. Looking at what do the numbers mean? I mean, think about it. If you're a sports fan, the first thing that you do when you walk into a room and there's a sports team on that you want to watch the game, the first thing you ask is, or look for is, what's the score? Well, yeah, that's the game they're playing, and what's the score tells you what you need to do to make, to win the game. I mean, think about it. There was a Super Bowl, and Atlanta was playing New England, and Atlanta was up at halftime. So the strategy in the locker room for Atlanta was, don't let them score. But we don't have to score as long as they don't score. We're good. And then the strategy in the locker room for New England was very simple. We can't let them score, and we got to score more points than they already have on the board to win this game. Well, they were up like by a lot. I don't remember the exact number, 25 points or something at halftime. and New England won the game. So understanding where you're at tells you what move to make to play the game. And again, the bottom line to this is you got to make money. Okay, how you doing on that? Scale of 1 to 10 and understanding that. Okay, number 8, days to repair. And what I'm saying is days to repair is not cycle time. Days to repair is keys to keys. The customer drops the car off on one day and picks up their car on another day, and the amount of days in between there is keys to keys. So how do you think you're doing on that? Okay, now the next one is cycle time or touch time. And normally what people do is they track this really simple by going, okay, there's 20 hours on the job and it took 5 days, keys to keys, to do. So we basically just, it's a simple math problem. You can go, okay, it's X amount of hours per day in touch time. That's not what I'm talking about. If the car comes in on Monday and it leaves on Friday, that's a 5-day repair. Okay, not a problem. That's keys to keys. But the cycle time or touch time, let's say that the car doesn't come in till into the shop until Wednesday. It just sat there for 2 days. And if it sat there for 2 days and now it's going out Friday, your cycle time, your division of your amount of hours on the estimate for your touch time would be divided by 3, not by 5. Now that takes a little bit more paying attention to what's going on in your shop. What you'll see is that if your touch time's good and your days to repair is bad, it's probably a scheduling problem. It's not a production problem. Now, if your cycle time or your touch time is 1 hour per day and it's in the cycling process, that could be due to parts, it could be due to overload of technicians, slow technician training, whatever it is. You really want to separate between those two. Okay, so number 8, days to repair. How do you think you're doing? Scale of 1 to 10. And then cycle time or touch time. How do you think you're doing? Scale of 1 to 10. Okay, next thing is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you're doing in your shop on safety? Now, I'm not saying how you doing on COVID protocols and all those things. I want you to go a little bit more global than that. How do you think you're doing really on safety? Now, I want you to pay attention. If you're in your office right now, look at your shop door, not the front door, but the door that goes to the back. You probably have a sign on the wall that says, safety glasses must be worn beyond this point. Okay, fine, great, that's your rule. Then you walk out in your shop and not everybody behind that door is wearing safety glasses. Now, I'm going to tell you from an OSHA standpoint that it's not required that if you walk back in the back of the shop that you have to have safety glasses on. It's not an OSHA rule. Now, you do have to be wearing them when you're mixing paint, when you're grinding, those kinds of things that would require you to have safety glasses. But walking beyond that door it's not an OSHA requirement, except if OSHA walks in your shop and sees that sign, you've actually created a rule that is more stringent than an OSHA standard by putting that sign up. Okay, what's the problem with that? OSHA will now adopt your standard, which is everybody has to wear safety glasses. So guess what? They walk back in your shop, and the first thing they do is they go, okay, there's 4 people without safety glasses on. That's 4 of OSHA violations. And they just walk out in your shop and look. I invite you today to walk back in your shop and look. Just go check it out. Now, one thing or the other. Either you take the sign down and don't have the requirement, or if you have the requirement, not a problem. Just make sure everybody wears safety glasses. It's really not a problem. How do you think you're doing on the level of safety as it relates to, first of all, protecting your employees, and second of all, how it relates to your exposure to a OSHA problem if something comes in? Okay, that being said, how do you make all of this work for you? And I know this is pretty intense and there's a lot like drinking from a fire hose. So first of all, I invite you to take all those numbers, look at the piece of paper that you had. Now, that's why I'm saying you might go back now and go, man, I really didn't do that the way Mark designed it to do. So I'll go back and watch the video again. Melissa, you're going to post this up pretty fast, right?
Yes, I will.
Okay, good. Okay, so how do you make this work for you? Really simple. Don't try and do all of them at once. Pick one or two at a time. When we do this interview with people in the shop, I'm sitting there and they go, okay, we need to work on 1 through 6. How do we do that? And it's like, well, guess what? You're going to do 1 through 6. Now pick 1 or 2. So you might just pick the comeback rate at the front desk, or the internal comeback rate, or the start-stop rate, or look at your SOPs. Don't try and do all of these because you won't get it all done. So again, pick 1 or 2 at a time. Have your staff get involved in this. So actually, when the replay happens, have your staff watch this and have them actually take the same quiz. You'll find that they're probably not on the same page as you as to what they think. The other thing that if this was a live event, like we were in a room back, pre-COVID, remember we used to be able to do that, I would tell you to turn to your partner next to you and get their name and phone number if you don't know them, and get an accountability. Pick the 2, get the accountability, and check in with each other on, hey, how you doing on your start-stop, or how you doing on this? Because if you don't get this into a habit, it takes 21 days to form a habit. Now, here's the cool part. Habits are hard to break unless you spend 21 days trying to break a habit, and that creates a new habit. Now, there's about 21 working days in a month, so it's going to take you 1 month to change the habit of whatever it is. So if you're going to get in the habit of tracking your comebacks, do it for 30 days, and then look. Just simply track it. Get an accountability partner and commit to constant improvement. This will never end. You'll consistently keep looking and looking and looking and looking. At Vico, we have a monthly program that we work with shops. We call them, we talk to them, and we start looking at the canary and the coal mine items, those 10. Say, okay, what are we working on? Okay, how you doing on that? Okay, what help do you need? And we actually do a site visits and do that with people as well. So what questions does anybody have? Melissa, I didn't see any pop up.
I don't see anybody raising their hand or any questions, but
Okay.
I will follow up. And if you could send me the survey, Mark, that would be great. And I'll send it out with the recording of this presentation.
Okay. Cool. Well, what's your feedback, Melissa? Scare the heck out of you to run a body shop now?
Really good information. I think everybody should take the survey and see where they
totally
are.
Agree.
Yeah, and take it in small sections. Do 2 at a time, and have somebody hold you accountable. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, absolutely. And then if anybody that on this call or even in the replay forever has any questions or comments or otherwise, there's my email and there is my phone number. Feel free to reach out. That's actually my cell phone number. So you'll call it, I'll answer, or leave a message and I'll get back to you. So thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody. And we'll follow up with your information, a copy of the recording and a copy of the survey, and we'll be in touch with future training opportunities. Everyone have a great day.